All right. So when you go to online to togetherstorying.com, you click the big green button on wherever you land in that website, and you'll go into our software. It's free, and we say, welcome to your re-authoring journey. We're going to re-author your story, make it more empowering, get you out of the rabbit hole, not even going to go in the rabbit hole, not going to deal with your problem-saturated account. We're going to ask you some simple questions, and it all works this way. Here's the model, all right? You have 7 antenarratives, 7 B's. The before, right? The the beneath, going beneath your mask, the bets on the future, what are we in being, et cetera, and then you get to the beyond, kind of more spiritual aspects if you're into that. And we have 7 W questions: who, what, when, where, why, with whom, and we look at the wish you have, your intentions for the future. So, and then we have the 7 principles of true storytelling that come from the book with Jens Larsen, Lena Brun, and myself, and it came out in 2020. And people around the world are getting together in true storytelling groups, and they work through the principles. Can we challenge the principles and maybe change the principles in my own book with Jens and Lena? Right, that's what this is about. So the next thing we look at is your unique pathway, where you choose one of the B's, one of the things. This kind of gives you the sequence. You take a pre-test and assessment. Then for induction, that's about gathering cases and pragmatism. We ask you, what are your little wow moments, you at your best, little wow moments where you were the exception to your whatever that thing is in the rabbit hole. And then we go to deduction. Every story has a theory, right? Every antenarrative fragment that's not yet a story, there's a theory there, some kind of belief, opinion, some kind of cause effect, kind of problem solution. This craziness happened and then that happened. So we call it deduction. And then we look at abduction, which is a wild guess. It's an intuition. Charles Sanders Peirce created it. So.
Welcome. Today, we're diving into something pretty profound. This idea that you can actually rewrite the story of your life. And we're going to look at a really cool tool for doing just that. It's called together storying. So let me ask you something right off the bat. Do you ever feel like you're just a character in a story that someone else wrote for you? You know, like you're stuck on this path following a script that just doesn't feel like yours? If you do, you're definitely not alone. It's a super common feeling. And believe it or not, there's a reason why. Yeah, a lot of us are kind of trapped in what we could call a stuck story. It's this idea that our life is just a straight line, right? A leads to B, which leads to C. This happened, so that happened, which means my future is, well, already decided. It's super rigid. But what if your story wasn't a line at all? What if it was more like this branching, sprawling network of possibilities? That's the huge shift we're talking about, from a static story to an active storying. And a huge reason we get stuck in that linear thinking goes way, way back. We're talking about the BME narrative, beginning, middle, end. This structure has been basically hardwired into Western culture since Aristotle, like 350 BCE. And look, it's great for movies and books, for sure. But when you apply it to your own life, it can feel like a total dead end, making you think the ending is already written and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, so how do we get out of that trap? Let's talk about a really powerful alternative, a whole new way to think about building your narrative. And this is where a really cool tool comes into the picture. It's a software program called Together Storying, and it was created by a scholar named David Boje. Its whole purpose is to help people, just like you, get unstuck from those limiting stories and, actually become the author of your own life. The whole idea here is a really simple but powerful shift in how we use language. It's about moving from story as a noun, a thing, something fixed, something that's already happened, to storying as a verb, an action. Storying is this dynamic, ongoing process. It's not something you have, it's something you do, right here, right now, to build your future. All right, That all sounds great, you might be thinking, but how does it actually work? Let's pull back the curtain and look at the mechanics, the nitty-gritty of how this software helps you forge new paths. So it all starts with this number, 343. Kind of specific, right? Well, it's not random at all. That number represents the total number of unique pathways the software can create for you. 343 different ways to start exploring and rewriting your story. It's basically a map of pure possibility. So how do you get to one of those 343 pathways? It's actually a pretty simple 3-step choice. Every time you use the tool, you make 3 selections from different sets of 7 options. So you'll choose an awareness level, you'll ask a certain type of question, like a why or a what, and then you'll pick a storytelling principle to apply. That unique combo, 7 times 7 times 7, is what creates one of those 343 paths. The whole system is designed to help you work with something Boje calls antenarratives. What are those? Well, think of them as the raw footage of your life. They're the little fragments, the forgotten details, those tiny little wow moments that ended up on the cutting room floor when you edited together your old stuck story. That's where the gold is. That's where you find the seeds for a brand new narrative. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds super modern, right? A new piece of software. But the philosophy behind it? It's actually more than 100 years old. Let's dig into the surprisingly deep roots that make this whole thing work. This software is built on a philosophical tradition that started right here in America, called pragmatism. And just look at this lineage. We're talking C.S. Peirce, William James, John Dewey. This is not some fringe theory. It's a serious school of thought developed over 150 years by some absolutely groundbreaking thinkers, scientists, psychologists, you name it. So what is pragmatism anyway? Well, in a nutshell, it's a philosophy of action. It's all about what works. Pragmatists aren't that interested in finding some absolute, capital T, truth. Instead, they ask a much more practical question. Is this idea a useful tool? Does it help us solve a real problem? Right here, right now. That's the test. And this quote from a more modern pragmatist, Richard Rorty, just nails it. He said, "We cannot regard truth as a goal of inquiry." Think about that. The goal isn't to find some final, unchanging answer and then stop. The goal is the inquiry itself, the ongoing conversation, the search for better ways to live together. It's not about being right, it's about making things better. And that way of thinking leads to this really key idea called fallibilism. It sounds complicated, but it's actually super simple. It just means that all our knowledge is provisional. We have to accept that we could be wrong. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a huge strength. It keeps us humble, it keeps us curious, and most importantly for what we're talking about today, it keeps us open to hearing and creating new stories. And if you look back at the classical pragmatists, you see this idea in action everywhere. They all shared that core belief in practical results, but they came at it from different angles. You had Peirce with his hard scientific logic, and then you had someone like Jane Addams who was doing this incredible hands-on ethical work right in the heart of communities. It just shows this has always been a philosophy for the real world. And that thinking didn't just stop. It's evolved with the neo-pragmatists, thinkers like Rorty, and, of course, Boje. They've taken those classic ideas and updated them for today, really zeroing in on things like language, conversation, and narrative. They use pragmatism to question who gets to decide what's true, arguing that truth is often just a story that a community has agreed on, not some fact floating out there in the universe. One thing all pragmatists really go after are these old, dusty philosophical divides. Appearance versus reality, mind versus matter, stuff like that. They basically say, hey, trying to split the world into these neat little boxes doesn't actually help us solve any real problems. In fact, it's often these rigid categories that get our stories stuck to begin with. Okay, so let's bring this all home. We've talked about software, we've talked about philosophy, but at the end of the day, what does this all mean for you, for your life, and for your future? If there is just one thing you take away from all this, I hope it's this. Your story is not a noun. It's not some finished thing, some heavy object from the past that you have to carry around forever. No, your story is a verb. It's an action. It's something you are doing in every single moment. So I'll leave you with this final empowering question. I want you to think about your own life, all those little forgotten bits and pieces. What's a little wow moment from your past? Something small but amazing that's just waiting there for you to pick it up and use it to start writing the very first sentence of your next chapter.
You can download the complete results that you've seen here onto your computer with that green button on the bottom. The one on the right, you can start another journey. You can return to the main menu, and that sort of explains what I'm talking about when I talk about together storying